Welcome back to yet another episode of Calloused podcast. Uh, Last week did not get a chance to put out an episode. Uh, we had run through my initial batch of, or not initial, but my recent batch of podcast recordings, and so I had been trying to get back to recording, and things have just been super busy, so I really didn't get an opportunity to. So yeah, had to take a week off from putting out an episode. Uh, Last weekend was a really busy, wonderful weekend, and here we are now. Though we are talking Nero today, and this one, this so we're gonna break Nero into two categories, or two, not two categories, but two lessons, essentially two episodes. So this week we're gonna talk about the guy, uh, his life, his death, and then next week we are going to talk about verses that were written while under his rule, and kind of put some stuff into context there, and really kind of start forming some stuff as far as going further down this whole persecution trail of like trying to understand different things within persecution of being a Christian, what it takes to be a Christian, to deal with those things. And I'll be the first one to say I really don't think that I have any clue. Sorry, I wanted to check my mic there for a second. It looked like it wasn't on. But I really don't think I have any clue, to be honest with you. I mean things have been said to me or whatever before, but that's not really persecution. Um, but we have the Bible, we have what has happened to them, we have so many examples, and I think those examples can be very encouraging whenever, from where I'm sitting, we may potentially enter those times within my lifetime. Uh, who knows? But where I really want to start is, so probably need, I, I've got a few things pulled up about Nero, but probably going to need one more thing. So, whenever he was born, one of the things that they do that's really, really interesting in Roman, uh, like Roman times, how I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but they would lay the baby on the floor, and the father would have to walk across the room and pick the baby up off the floor in order, or like in a way to claim him as his son or their child or whatever. And so his dad does, but Nero was born breech, and um, there was some sort of odd quote. I can't remember what the quote is, but it's like Nero was born as the sun comes up, or like his birth was the same as that of the sun, or something like that. And it was just really, really an interesting quote. But Nero's father was Gnaeus Domitius Henobarus, who eventually, like, who dies in about 40 CE. But Nero was brought up under by his mom, Julia Agrippina, and she was the great granddaughter of the Emperor Augustus. And Agrippina poisoned her second husband, um, and she incestuously. There's a whole lot of incest, by the way, with this whole like Nero situation, like a lot. But she Agrippina ends up getting married to Claudius, who is like her uncle, and basically talks him into favoring Nero. And so it's just like some sort of whole like wild, weird, like trailer park going on over there. And it gets weird. So like he starts favoring Nero, and like he gets like terribly. Whoa, 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 whoa. Sorry, somehow I tapped something and it caused an ad to start playing. Uh, but um, so then uh, Agrippina pushes it even further and has him marry him being Nero, marry Octavia, which is his like cousin, essentially, and uh, Agrippina had like murder and incest are just like wild in this family because she helped bring about the murder of Valeria Messalina, which was her predecessor as wife for Claudius, and like all this is getting found out, I guess. But she's continuously trying to like push through all these different relationships and stuff to get Nero to the throne. And during all that, she actually, there's a theory that she had Claudius poisoned. And uh, like she, like as soon as she gets like that happened, the palace gets sealed up. Um, Nero gets paraded around as like the new emperor, and he wasn't even 17 yet when all this happened, by the way. And it's just a very very weird situation the whole way around, like his upbringing was. And you can read about a lot of this that I am citing from the Encyclopedia Britannica, like their website. It's Britannica.com. But also, if you have access to PTP 365, Luke Griffin has an absolutely amazing lesson on Nero, which I used for a like study guide as well. I'm basically just using Britannica to uh, jog my memory so I can reiterate what I have learned about Nero. And we're going to read some Tacitus here in a little bit because Tacitus was one of the main historians at the time. And yeah, we're there's a fair amount to cover. That's why I'm breaking it up into 2 episodes. But then like Narcissus gets eliminated. We're not 100% sure. A lot of people like to fault Agrippina for his downfall because he opposed her like all the time. Um, her hopes were to control the government, but Stoic, Nero's old tutor, uh, or well, his name wasn't Stoic. I'm sorry, I messed that up. He was a Stoic philosopher, Lucius Annius Seneca. Um, they weren't content to remain her tools, her or Burrus, and so or Lucius and Burrus. Sorry. Uh, so they wanted Nero to, hey, think for yourself. You don't have to follow your mom's ruling here, and uh, basically because of that, they were able to work their way into where they essentially controlled Rome, like controlled the empire because they got the ear of Nero and used this young kid to do what they wanted. So Nero has a lot of people in his ears telling him what to do, and it's it's not good. And I mean, think about it. This kid had palace life that also was a warped palace life, which I don't know what palace life upon studying history wasn't warped, but I mean, this dude's married to his cousin. Uh, the Daytona 500 didn't even exist yet. I'm sorry. I gotta quit making the silly uh, jokes about the incest stuff. But um, he had it rough right out the gate, and then obviously like he was aware of his mom's doings as far as like being involved in these assassinations and everything like that, and it was that was a common thing in like rulers' households as well, assassinating people and stuff like that. Matter of fact, Nero tries to do it to his mom. He puts her away on an island and keeps her there for a while, trying to decide what he's going to do. And then he eventually brings her to this party. They have a big party. Love you, mom. Blah 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 blah. Puts her on the boat. Boat was supposed to sink with her on it, and she was like also supposed to be like, well, okay. Now I'm recalling it. So they sink the boat. She had somebody with her who's like, I'm Agrippina. Help save me. I'm Nero's mom. So the people that went to her killed her, and Agrippina like made it out of there. Gets back to the castle or whatever on the island. Is like, hey, send a message to my son. Made it out. I'm okay. Blah 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 blah. Basically, it sounds like a sweet message of like, oh, my ship almost sank, but really what it was nice try, and it's just absolutely wild. Uh, all the stuff that goes on through all of that. But then he finally succeeds because he sends basically assassins to kill her. And so she's gone. It's now just him. And he also ends up deciding along the way, let me make sure I'm not going to miss something, but he ends up eventually deciding, like, I'm a musician and I'm an actor, and he wants to do all these different things with those. And there's actually a whole section on it called pretensions, like artistic pretensions and irresponsibility. Uh, Nero basically uh, decide, or like this is through Seneca's persuasion. Nero is going to pursue uh, his artistic crafts. So he wants to start playing a musician, like be a musician, and he wants to do all these different things. He kind of goes out on like a tour and all this other stuff. He falls in love with somebody else, has Octavian murdered, and it's just constant insanity from all this. His then wife only lived for 3 years. Poppaea was her name, and then he marries another lady, Statia Messalina, and just all kinds of wild things. Like there's an earthquake while he's playing a concert, and he demands everybody to stay and listen to him. Oh, it's not that bad. And at the end of the concert, everybody leaves, and then the place crumbles to the ground, and people see it as, excuse me, like an omen of like bad luck, and oh, this dude is bad for Rome and all this other stuff, and he sees it as a good omen. It's like, well, nobody died, and just all kinds of insanity like that, and it continues like that. And he's away, and a fire breaks out in Rome, and it's a bad fire. It's like a really, really bad fire. But people suspect him to actually be kind of the one that lit the fire. I don't have a whole lot of proof on that though, but I've seen a lot of stuff that accuses him of that, and I don't quite get where they're coming from, because he wasn't in town. Like they had to come get him and bring him back because it was on fire, and he was doing everything he could to stop the fire. He had soldiers being like helping the firefighters that were actual like firefighters for Rome. They're tearing buildings down, but it's still jumping across stuff, and they're doing anything and everything they can. But they get to a point of like, okay, well, who's responsible for this? And essentially, he blames the Christians because he needs somebody to blame, because fingers are starting to come back on him. And when anybody gets in, that kind of situation, what do? A lot of times, because it is hard to own up to our own faults, a lot of times we blame somebody else, right? So he starts blaming the Christians. And so there is a Christian persecution underneath Nero, and there's a lot of different ones where uh, they're pretty brutal, they're pretty violent, and one of them that is famous that a lot of people know is that he used Christians as candlelight for his dinners and whatnot, and that's pretty bad. That's pretty brutal. That's pretty rough. And so we see Nero as this monster, which he is. Uh, don't get me wrong. Like a guy that's going to kill his own mom and do all these other things that are horrible. Yeah, bad. I listened to a podcast or started to, and it was like, oh yeah, Nero wasn't that bad. Nero was a good guy. He was a great actor. That's why people wanted to impersonate him, stuff like that. We impersonate people who are horrible at all kinds of things all the time nowadays. So to say that, I don't believe that either because there's like proof that no, he wasn't a good actor and wasn't a good musician. But uh, like with all of this, he still killed Christians. There was still a persecution under him. So to say, oh, he was a good guy, no, he wasn't a good guy. Uh, but as far as like mass amount of Christians that he killed, he is on the lower side. We're gonna look at all that. And matter of fact, uh, by the time we wrap this up, which I don't know when that'll be, because there's a lot of stuff I want to cover. Basically, looking at like ancient Rome, because like the whole idea behind this is a history aspect, not just a persecution aspect. But by the time we get done looking at persecution and stuff, I want to try to come up with a graph of some sorts of like, Christians killed in the Colosseum and all these different things, and really like break it down and look at who did what. And then I kind of want to look at Constantine and the founding of the Catholic Church to kind of put some things into perspective because I came across some stuff actually in the Tacitus reading that I found incredibly interesting. And yeah, so I think we're going to go down that road some in the future too. But I'm going to read you this stuff from Tacitus and then we're going to kind of start wrapping this up. I got to pull it back up though. Here it is. And this is in book, I want to say 6? No, 15. Book 15. And it's chapter, sorry, I'm trying to find the chapter number for you. It's like book 15, chapter 44, I believe. I can't find it on here at the current moment. Oh, 1544. There you go. Book 15, chapter 44. So such indeed were the precautions of human wisdom. The next thing was to seek means of propitiating, I don't know why I struggled so much with that, the gods. And recourse was had to the Sibylline books, by the direction of which prayers were offered to Vulcanus, Ceres, Proserpina, Juno too, was entreated by the matrons, first in the capital, then on the nearest part of the coast, which water was procured to sprinkle the fane in images of the goddess. And there were sacred banquets and nightly vigils celebrated by married women, but all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor, and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. So it's still believed that through all this that it is Nero's fault. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate, in a most mischievous superstition. Thus, checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. Accordingly, an arrest was made of all who pleaded guilty. Then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skin of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as nightly illumination when daylight had expired. Nero offered his gardens for the spectacle and was exhibiting a show in the circus, while he mingled with the people in the dress of a charioteer or stood aloft on a car. Hence, even for criminals who deserved extreme and exemplary punishment, there arose a feeling of compassion, for it was not, as it seemed, for the public good, but to glut one man's cruelty that they were being destroyed. So, really, really not nice guy. But eventually, things break down and people really don't like him and people don't want him in power anymore. So he ends up on the run, terrified for his life, and he starts freaking out. And he gets so scared that he decides he's going to take his life. But before he takes his life, he wants to see what it's like. So he has one of his aides kill themselves. And so he's not fully convinced whenever his aide kills himself. And so he's still a nervous mess about doing it, but he does it anyway. And whenever he does, yeah, it's like whole thing. So just a whole life of just disaster after disaster. Uh, Not a nice guy, definitely a monster in my books. But my whole thing was whenever I started doing this particular study was, okay, if this guy is such a monster, why are people saying, well, he's not that bad? And it's not that he's not that bad. It's that other people killed more Christians. Other people did horrifying things to Christians. It's not trying to minimize what he did. It's just understanding the scale of like where it falls, essentially. Still a horrible guy. Like from my perspective, especially. But did he like kill as many as others? No. His persecution of the Christians was limited compared to others, and that's the big thing that is like the takeaway. And it's definitely not, oh, he wasn't a bad guy. No, definitely a bad guy. So I want to make those things clear. That being said, we have reached the end of today's discussion on Nero. Hopefully you found it helpful. Hopefully you learned some. I know I learned some through this whole process of studying for this particular episode. I'm really liking focusing on the history and whatnot because I'm a history buff, and so I'm learning some stuff, and I hope you are too. That being said, we're going to call it good here. We will see you next week on the Calloused Hands podcast.